Barcelona, the goal continues on. As I said, it's the business side of Dembele. You're losing business. You're losing Dembele due to business, due to negotiations, due to all the stuff off the field. So Dembele's gone, whether it's now or 6 months. Either way, Barcelona are going to continue on. The club continues on. The club moves on, and Barca are still going to be desperate to get top four. The Champions League, the Super Copa, Copa del Rey, all gone. No trophies for that this season. 17 points off the top of the Liga at the moment. Napoli coming up in the Europa League. And as you said, losing Ansu Fati and Pedri. Now we're recording this right after Athletic Club. You'll be hearing this the day after the match, of course. But yeah, so with all of those questions moving forward, I think Xavi's probably going to say the same thing we are. That hey, I mean, I know that we have to put pride aside for a little bit. This player's gone. We know he's gone, but I have to use this asset because I'm going to need him on the field for the remainder of this season. So okay, now we're going to switch gears a little bit to this Athletic Club. To your point, yes, I think Ansu Fati and Pedri, unfortunately, especially when news and the headlines of how long they're out for, because with Ansu's emotional reaction, that is kind of what it doesn't seem great. It doesn't.
Not good.
It's not great.
No.
So to quote a wise man on Twitter.com, to sum up the whole match, he said this at halftime, by the way, Levon. Lucky to go into halftime tied. If Bilbao played as well against other teams as when they play us, they'd be in Europe. And I think you're right. The Athletic Club played, and that's you, of course. That is Barcelona on Twitter. Give him a follow. But yeah, I think they played really, really well. That's true. I thought Pedri was the best player on the field, and Ansu can change a game. And I think that's sum of all of that is what makes it most frustrating. And I think these is one of those matches where, as I'm still, you're going to see the match review first, and then you'll have heard this. But as I'm trying to figure out what the top 5 headlines are, as I try to break down that YouTube video, I mean, Piqué had a great game. Araujo had a great and not so great game. Dest came on to play at a position as a left winger, but all that stuff, even the Busquets point about tactics or whatever, I feel like we don't have time for any of that because of how much happened in this game. And it feels like there was just so much going on, right? Ferran Torres scored his first goal with the club. Pedri and Gabi started their first game together. It's just, there's so much that happened in this match. I don't even know where to begin outside of the fact that Ansu and Pedri might be lost for the future. But how do we even talk about this game in context?
Ansu is the headline. So I think it is hamstring. They were talking about the muscles in his hind legs. So, that it's not a knock that he received, and now he has to recover from the knock. No, it's another muscle injury. Pedri, it seemed like a muscle injury too, to be honest, although some people were saying that it might be cramp. I like where this team is going. We struggle at the fullback positions. Jordi Alba, and that I think Jordi Alba is an amazing footballer, but Jordi Alba does not perform well in games where there's a lot of pressure. So games at the San Mamés, games at Anfield, where with teams that just go at him and go at him and keep going at him, he loses his head. He makes mistakes, and he does not have the heart to recover from those mistakes. Dani Alves. Have we ever seen a 38-year-old play 120 minutes of football with the intensity of Dani Alves? I thought that was nice to see. He did make some mistakes though, especially in the first half, and I thought he made mistakes in one of his other games as well. So is he going to iron out those mistakes, or is he going to keep making them? We don't know. Araujo, difficult match for him, but you play a right-footed center back on the left, whose only weakness is playing the ball out of defense. So that is always tough against a team that presses so well as Bilbao. The real story of the match for us is that Ansu is injured, but for the match, it's just about how great Bilbao played. You have to give them credit.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the one-off Copa del Rey matches are better. I enjoyed them, but the crowd at the San Mamés, the nature of it, the way Athletic Club play, the weather as well. I think, Athletic Club just outplayed Barcelona. And while it is a tough pill to swallow, it's true. I think even starting on the back line and then moving forward, I agree with your sentiments on Alba. I've said the same thing, that he's a top 3, top 5 attacking fullback still in the world today. I mean, well, we'll say left back and not include right backs, but left back. There's very few that are going to be able to bring every other name you mentioned, whether it's Grimaldo, Agaya, or whoever it is that you mentioned at left back to come in for Jordi Alba. You're going to lose something offensively. But yeah, defensively in games like this, you put him up against Nico Williams, and I mean, it was a wrap. You saw that immediately that it was a wrap. It was going to be all night like that. And then Iñaki Williams comes on because Sanchez gets hurt. And the combination that the brothers even had was too much for that right side. And yeah, and this is an interesting puzzle that Xavi, I think, is going to have to figure out, where I don't even think the personnel he has might be able to get the conclusion he wants, where the way Xavi plays and the way that they're going to build up and work through that pressure, you need Eric Garcia's progressive passing. It is essential to building up and actually providing Busquets the necessary long passes to bypass Busquets when necessary, where instead of always having Busquets have to drop so deep, because that was the problem, where Busquets was dropping so deep and then Athletic Club were just, they were licking their lips and they're off to the races. And so Garcia's progressive passing can alleviate some of that pressure. But then to survive defensively, you need Ronald Araujo. You need Araujo on the field, shutting down guys. And even though he had poor moments, there was also, especially against Iñaki Williams when he came on, that game could have been worse if not for Araujo. And then,
Absolutely.
And then the great irony is that PK has arguably been the most consistent, best center defender under Xavi that he's had. So it really is a puzzle for Xavi to break down along that back line. But I think what is, as we said, Dani Alves was good, but a 38-year-old Dani Alves, especially when we saw the last two matches in El Clasico when he had to go against Vinny Jr., you see that Dani Alves is 38 in those instances. And the other side, what Jordi Alba can offer you isn't offset by what Alves does. And then again, in the middle, you have Busquets and PK. And then again, Araujo can't really pass his way out of trouble. And Eric Garcia, as we've said, 1v1 against a counterattack isn't great either. So you have all players individually. You pick them up and say, Jordi Alba, yeah, of course I'd start Jordi Alba. But who are you starting him next to? Yes, I'd start Dani Alves. He certainly has the talent still. But then what is next to him and what is protecting him? For Ronald Araujo, who is going to be passing out and making sure that Busquets has the support he needs on the ground? And then you start to look farther up the field for that. But yeah, it's a puzzle that is impossible to fit together with this personnel. And it's, again, another flashpoint that this is where Barca is with their squad at the moment. They have a lot of individual great players, but putting it all together is a lot more difficult, where even back to the time of Koeman, I think Xavi's tactics have improved. I think Barca looked better, but it's hard to even tell how Barca looked better when Pedri wasn't on the field. I'm transitioning to Pedri because he was the best player in the game. There's no argument. And Barca only controlled the match when Pedri was controlling the match.
I think he was our best player on the game. He was not necessarily the best player on the pitch.
I think Iker Muniain was the best player on the field.
Yeah. Also, Pedri was also really good.
He was really good.
Yeah.
We're not arguing.
I think one of the things that Xavi could do is play three in the back. How do you solve an issue where the problem is that we don't have fullbacks? You play without fullbacks. And you go three in the back. I think the problem with three in the back is then who would you play there? So you want Araujo probably on the right or in the middle. You want Piqué in there, but then you're not going to put Piqué on the right. He's too slow. So you put Piqué in the middle, Araujo on the right. Who do you put on the left? You can put Eric Garcia on the left. You could also put Frankie de Jong in a three-man back line, which I like a lot. But if you put Frankie de Jong in a three-man back line, he's not going to accept playing center left back.
Well, in that match in that match today, Busquets was the one taking up that position when de Jong came on the field. And then you saw the issues there. And then de Jong wound up backtracking anyway. So it was this constant scramble that you needed Busquets there in the build-up, but you needed de Jong there defensively, and he just kept getting caught out in that position. I mean, I think ideally speaking, you would have Piqué in the middle, Araujo on the right, and Garcia on the left. But I think it depends on personnel on the other team too. If their best player is a left winger, then Araujo goes on the. Let me flip it around, and then he goes on the right. And if their best attacker is a right winger, then Araujo's on the left. And I think that's almost how you have to play it.
Yeah, that also makes sense. But I do see a future where, they're with all the talent that we have in the midfield, Frankie's role might be the center back in a back three, where you have Araujo, Frankie, and Eric Garcia, which could be very interesting. If not, if you play 4-3-3, what I like, and I'm a huge admirer of Busquets. What I don't like is when Busquets drops in between the two center backs, because what happens is that the two center backs don't push up, so you just have three people in the back that can pass the ball to each other. And often there's like no clear progression on where they take the ball forward, because we don't have the midfielders that then drop back. And Busquets is very static because he's a pivot, so he doesn't take the ball forward himself either. However, if you have Frankie in the pivot, Frankie can drop back in between those two center backs perfectly. He can go there, pick up the ball, because then he can pass it, or he can actually drive it forward and break lines that way. So if we're gonna in possession have a holding midfielder who constantly drops in between our own two center backs, then Frankie might be that guy. We'll see.
But I think the person on the other team matters too. As we said, Athletic Club is at this point at 33 years old in his career is very antithetical to what Busquets does well, where especially with Pedri and Gavi, and it was again antithetical to the way that Xavi wants to set up his numerical advantages in the middle. So again, the system he wants to employ, I think eventually is that double pivot with the two high interiors in front. And you can't really do that with Busquets when the other team is pressing in this way, because again, you're leaving Pedri and Gavi alone on these islands. And Gavi wasn't perfect with his ball playing today. And I mean, I think he was also just a bit out of position. But that actually shows that was where I actually thought Pedri was amazing today. It wasn't even the spins and the turns and the ball retention were one thing when Barca had the ball. That was one thing.
It's knowing where to be.
Yeah, those things are impressive. Yeah. But it was the way that, as we've said, why did De Jong and Busquets not really work together? Well, it's because De Jong doesn't really make up for when Busquets gets caught out in a position. De Jong doesn't really get in the right spots that he needs to clean that mess up. Pedri is just excellent at cleaning up all of those messes, and not Busquets' messes, just in general. In the middle of the field, high, low, it doesn't matter. He's everywhere he needs to be. And again, I think Gavi works hard enough to be everywhere he needs to be, but Pedri also gets in on the tackle. He wins the ball. And again, he retains the ball the second he gets it because his skill is superior to most other midfielders.